Republican leaders are downplaying the Congressional Budget Office report on the Obamacare replacement plan. Joining us now to discuss that and more, Republican Congressman Tom Garrett of Virginia. He's a member of both the House Foreign Affairs and Homeland Security Committees. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Wolf, it's my pleasure. How are you?
All right, so let's get your reaction. The Congressional Budget Office report, as you know, says 14 million people would be uninsured under this new Republican plan within the next year. By 2018, 24 million would be uninsured by 2026, within a decade. You've been critical of the bill. If the Speaker, Paul Ryan, doesn't allow for major changes, will you vote for it?
Right now, I'm a no. I'm a firm no. I candidly don't see how we get to 216. But let's look at the paradigm. We talk about coverage. Let's talk about access to care, because that's what the argument should be about. And right now what you've got is people who have coverage who can't afford to pay their deductibles, therefore they don't have care. What we need to do is find a plan that actually gives Americans access to affordable care as opposed to a piece of paper with a deductible and a premium they can't afford.
Do you believe that the Speaker will have the 216 votes necessary? Because a lot of your conservative colleagues are saying what you just said, they can't vote for this.
No, I don't, I respect Speaker Ryan and what he's trying to do here. It's a tough task, but there's a couple of major sticking points. Certainly we're rewarding bad behavior in the Medicaid expansion states, also sort of creating an entitlement by virtue of where we place the tax credit in the process. The good news is that we'd reduce the deficit by $1/3 trillion, so that's something. And I do think there are a lot of standalone measures that are moving forward. McCarran-Ferguson repeal, allowing small businesses to pool to create numbers for care that will go through. But the bill writ large, I have a tough time fathoming how you get to 216 right now.
If the bill fails, do you think President Trump will be blamed for the failure, or will the blame go to the Speaker, Paul Ryan?
Yeah, we don't. I mean, look, and President Trump said this the other day, and I think that Speaker Ryan would say the same thing. If we wanted to play politics with America's health care, we just wouldn't do anything, because it's absolutely undeniable that Obamacare is in a death spiral. And if we just let the status quo go, we're going to see what real pain and suffering looks like when people who have coverage on paper but can't afford to pay their inflated deductibles can't get the treatment that they deserve. So we're trying to do good here. If this bill fails, that doesn't mean that we don't circle back around and work on another bill. In fact, I'm sure we will. And again, the easy political thing to do would just be to let the wheels fall off the Obamacare disaster. That's not what we're here to do.
You think your concerns, the concerns of your conservative colleagues, are being heard by the White House? And correct me if I'm wrong, you were supposed to go to the White House for a pizza and bowling event with the president tonight. I take it that's been canceled. Is that right?
The date is going to be moved because of some of the folks having trouble flying in. We're not going to the White House to get whipped, to get pushed in the line. We're going to the White House to discuss what our concerns are with the president and his administration. He has proven to be an adept listener. And I think he wants to get something good done. So where you start's not always where you finish. And this is working with the guy who wrote the book, The Art of the Deal. So we think there's room for movement, and we can get something that works for America.
When is that pizza and bowling event going to be rescheduled for?
This I do not yet know. I only learned that it was going to be moved about 5 minutes before going on the air with you.
And so if you go to the White House and speak to the President of the United States, what will be your bottom line message to him on the future of health care?
Well, number one, you need to recognize that individuals will exercise free will. They certainly did under Obamacare with the individual mandate, where so many people chose to pay the penalty. We need to recognize that that's not only inherent to human nature, but inherent to a free state. We need to create access to care that's actually care as opposed to coverage, because that's a false paradigm that we've seen throughout the Obamacare story, that, oh, look how many more people have coverage. Well, coverage doesn't equal care if you can't pay your deductible, and that's the glide path we've been on. So there are a lot of ideas. I think there are some good pieces to the Ryan plan. There are also a lot of standalone bills that aren't getting a whole lot of attention in the press that will help open up markets and create better access to affordable care. So we're moving forward. The easy thing to do, again, would just be to let this thing explode on its own. We're not going to do that. We're going to do what's right for America.
While I have you, Congressman, let me get your quick reaction. There's talk about the unsubstantiated wiretap claims made by President Trump, 10 days ago in those series of 4 tweets. The White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer says the president wasn't really talking about actual wiretapping in those allegations against President Obama. He was talking about broader surveillance. Let me play the clip. Listen to this.
He doesn't really think that President Obama went up and tapped his phone personally. I think, but I think there's no question that the Obama administration, that there were actions about surveillance and other activities that occurred in the 2016 election. That is a widely reported activity that occurred back then. The president used the word wiretap in quotes to mean broadly surveillance and other activities.
What's your reaction to that comment? Is the White House backing away from what the president initially claimed?
Well, I can't speak for the White House, but I mean, we know to a metaphysical certainty that there were comms intercepts. We know to a metaphysical certainty the New York Times wrote about intercepts of conversations prior to January 20th, when the administration changed. I guess what we need to get to the bottom of is where they got the comms intercepts.
But let me
and who was being
interrupt
intercepted.
about Congressman. If there are intercepts of communications involving Russian officials, for example, wiretapping Russian officials, monitoring phone calls from Russian officials serving here in the United States, that's one thing. But for the president to say the former President Obama, ordered the wiretapping of Trump Tower in order to wiretap on the then candidate and then the president-elect Donald Trump, that is very, very, very much something else, correct?
Absolutely, but do we not know that there were two separate applications to a FISA court for surveillance that would fall within the scope of what we think is being contemplated?
But that's different than ordering the wiretapping of Donald Trump as a candidate. There's no evidence that President Obama said, let's listen in on the conversations of Donald Trump. You agree, right?
Not that I have access to, no. But what we do know is there was surveillance that spanned into the Trump campaign team. And was it done intentionally or was it accidental and incidental? That's what we ought to get to the bottom of.
But if that surveillance involved Russian activities, that would be very different than spying on American citizens.
Right, which goes back to the question I asked, which is, was the surveillance that overlapped onto the Trump campaign, if that's what happened, intentional or incidental? If it was intentional, there's malfeasance. If it was incidental, then that's just the way the game's played. We don't know that yet.
All right, well, let's get some answers. If there is evidence, we'd love to see it. Congressman Tom Garrett, thanks very much for joining us.
Absolutely my pleasure, and God bless.